We are live. We're here. Welcome, everyone, to the Data Center News Show. And I've got more people coming to the stage. And we're just having a grand old time. And hey, Sean. And we're going to be talking power. Power is awesome. So we're doing all sorts of fun things, power. And I got a couple people who might know what they're talking about power. They're talking about is my understanding. and it's and then we also have we got one more person coming to the stage. We're gonna have a big full house. It's a full house now. Howard Berry's here. All right, so we'll get started. I'll have my guests introduce themselves, and then we'll just kick it off and start talking power. Harry.
Thanks, Amy.
Hanlon, new retiree.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Harry Hanlon, recently retired this last week.
All right. I just lost everyone. Harry, your turn. Kick us off.
Okay. I'm Harry Hanlon. I just retired this week from ABB. I have been in the data center business exclusively for about the last 15 years, been in the electrical industry for 46. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Amy.
Well, congratulations on your retirement.
Okay.
Yeah. There we go. We're losing you, Amy.
I know. It's so weird. I need to stand on one foot or something. And something's happening. Well, all right. This is awesome. Okay. So I'm assuming, Harry, you told yourself. Dave, go for
it. Hi, I'm Dave Sterlace. I'm with Hitachi Energy. And we're large. Our primary stuff is interconnect between utilities and large facilities like data centers. My role is in data center account management for a hyperscale client.
Very cool. And Paul?
Yeah.
Hello, Amy. Great to be here. So first time I've been on this podcast. So I'm the CEO of Floral Energy Limited, which is a transatlantic business, partly based in the UK, partly based in Pittsburgh. And we've been set up to scale microgrid technology and develop combined heat and power to power the hyperscale data centers and to recover otherwise lost energy. Before this job, I was the CTO of Rolls-Royce. That's airplane engines and nuclear reactors, not cars. And I span out the small modular reactor business for Rolls-Royce, which is now getting some momentum, particularly powering data centers. So to some extent, Floral Energy fills the gap between now and SMRs coming online in volume, which will be a good sort of 10 plus years, given the supply chain challenges.
Very cool. And Reza, you're here. Hi, sir. How are you?
Hi there. My name is Reza Rastegar. I'm with Arcadis. I'm mostly involved in grid interconnection of the data center. I'm involved in that area. Thank you.
Yeah. And Howie. Hi, Howie. How are you?
Hello, Howard Berry, Avis Young, all things data center real estate.
All things, and former electrician, so you can geek out with all these people. Like when I get like this,
guys.
Yeah. I know. I was warning Harry. It's like when we get started, Harry, y'all are gonna geek out, and I'm gonna have to interrupt you, going, "What the hell did you just say?" Because I'm not gonna know. But that's all right. Hey, Sean, how are you, buddy?
Hey, Sean Farney, VP Data Center Strategy at JLL, and the first Farney in 3 generations not to be a Southside Chicago electrician. I'm a 21st century electrician.
Really?
Centers. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. I'm just here because I heard Sterling. Well, data centers are the logical extension of, I think, of electricity infrastructure. Like in the last century, electricity is what kind of built our society and culture and industrial base, and now I think it's data centers. So I think there's a good analogy there.
Yeah, works for me. I'll buy it. I'll take that story. All right, y'all get to see the lovely packing of the boxes behind me. Joshua, how are you, buddy?
Very good. Thanks for the invite, Amy. Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. I work with sales, marketing, product, and channel partnership professionals throughout the data center ecosystem. Most of my strongest background over the past 10 years has been with colo and technology-related companies. It's my background coming on the marketing and sales enablement side of IT channel, VARs, MSP ecosystems.
Paul, you're doing backflips over there. I don't understand what's happening, but it's pretty interesting. All right. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Is it me? Am I the only one seeing this? I have weird connectivity issues. Maybe it's me. Larry, why don't you get us started, since you retired from ABB, so you know a little bit about infrastructure, and what do you think the top 3 challenges are as data centers kind of try to do behind the meter power generation and things like that?
Yeah, I think there are several challenges. I think one is data centers are growing in scale. It's harder to find locations with adequate power, and they're forced to go behind the meter. That's what's driving this, especially with AI, just the huge amounts of power. Several people probably saw last week where Rick Perry announced an 11 gigawatt data center, which just an incredible amount of power. I live in Alabama, so I did a search to say how much power generation do we have in Alabama, and it's 31 gigawatts. So he's going to pull in one data center more than a third of the power our state generates. So just incredible.
And that's behind the meter.
Yes, and that's all behind the meter.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I don't always want. I don't know what's going on, Paul. It's driving me nuts. I don't bet against Rick Perry. I mean, the dude's pretty well connected, and if he says he can pull it off. But it seems like a lot of those, that announcement, this announcement I got, and there was another one behind it. Someone else is doing 30 gigawatt. Like, it's just insane. The amount.
Yeah. I'm working on a 31 gigawatt one now. So
Are you really?
That's last week.
I'm so jealous. Yeah. I'm so jealous.
There you go.
I don't know. But so if we're talking about generating that much power, how much land is necessary? I mean, I feel like if you're doing 100, you're doing 100 acres for a data center, and then you're going to have to need 500 acres just to do the power generation, or what are we talking about? Someone tell me. Howie,
I was reading some of the mainstream press on the Meta announcement a couple of days ago, and the way they were describing looking for this huge continuous block of space, it sounded like reading about the Disney brothers in the 1960s flying around Florida looking for a much bigger version of Anaheim. That kind of rush, that kind of mentality. They say they're building 3 power plants to support it.
Wow.
Insane.
Wow.
It was either it was half or 3 times. They were drawing comparisons between how much power it's going to use in northern Louisiana compared to New Orleans. It was either 50% of New Orleans or a multiple of New Orleans or something for this one campus that eventually will employ 500 people.
Well, gotta get 1 per acre. It'd be fine, something like that. I don't know. That's
Meta has put in some serious investment into AI. And he's recruited they recruited away from OpenAI or Apple or something with a $200 million salary.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like baseball player salaries.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, so Dave, tell us. You've been in the industry for a little while, just a smidge. You're a newbie. You're real green around behind the ears there. So from a you're working at Hitachi. So talk about Hitachi's role, and then understanding how the power generation behind the meter or in front of the meter or whatever, however we're going to power, whatever we're going to power. Talk about what you're seeing from where you've been.
So just to level set, Hitachi comes from what was ABB Power Grids. which comes from what was Westinghouse Power and Transmission. So literally 100-year history here in U.S. We sometimes say that 2 out of 3 electrons, if you plug something in the wall, goes through our transformers or something like that. So plenty of installed base. To what Harry and Josh were saying, certainly we think that, first of all, part of this is driven by we have lots of power. It's not necessarily in the right spot. So we have a little bit more, in my view, in a transmission and distribution issue. So we don't necessarily have the power in the right spot. If you look at data centers, depending on who you listen to, we'll say roughly 4% of U.S. power grid. I think we've all seen that recently. Even if that doubles compared to what's going on in commercial buildings, it's still a fraction. It's maybe 10%, 15, 20% of what commercial buildings use. And we all know that commercial buildings aren't necessarily full to the brim like they were 10 years ago, pre-pandemic, right? So part of me says there's got to be just a way to reallocate power in a different way. That being said, we're building data centers, and Hitachi and other companies make products to actually tell you where power is available with software and things like that. And a lot of the big guys are using that to hone in on stuff. In fact, one of the national labs overlaid it with a fiber map, so you can really see what's going on. It's pretty interesting, which I'll send you later or I'll put it in the chat box so that folks can see. But with that in mind, then we do see one of the issues is, unless we're going to co-locate next to a nuclear power plant that we can recommission to get it done in time, it looks like the logical things are probably going to be natural gas and things like that we see folks like VoltaGrid and other folks building behind the meter stuff that is at scale. If you talk to a hyperscaler, any of them, and about things like battery energy storage, they're like, we need 300 watts or megawatts for 4 hours. So that's 1.2 gigawatts worth of batteries. That's a nightmare. That's not really feasible at this point. So I think there's other things to do. If you look at developments from folks like Bloom around, their dollars per kilowatt's gotten pretty close to gas recip now. Plus it's a little bit future proof. I look at folks like, other folks in the same area. There's a lot of good technologies coming. So I think we're looking at a bridge technology till we kind of figure out the grid a little better, in my view. And this probably completely could be at odds with some folks, but anyway, that's kind of where my thinking is, and look forward to discussing.
Well,
it's
U.S.
with reality,
infrastructure,
right? I
was going to say the U.S. infrastructure has got like a D- rating, so that came down from a C- rating.
Yeah.
So it's only getting worse as we expand, and you look at all these infrastructure plans or these expansions for 500 kVA running around different states like Nevada.
750 now, yeah, but exactly how.
Yep. Yeah, that's unbelievable. I just saw where there was another application they were looking to run from Nevada into California to Tesla plant, a 500 kV line. And so, this is going to take easily 5 years or more to even get that constructed.
For sure. And there's some smart things being considered, like, and there's a word for it, but anyway, I think it's called reconductoring, where you just use the existing right of way, so you don't have to go through a lot of stuff and just expand the infrastructure that way. Certainly, I think we could benefit from more extra high voltage, 750 kV on up type voltage, and Nevada to California going over, I lived in the Bay Area for a while, and coming over the Hetch Hetchy, from Hetch Hetchy into the Bay Area, that's already there. That could be expanded fairly easily, I would think, and that'll still be faster than building new power plants, and it'll still probably, that'll help with that bridge, I think. But right now, to your point, we need stuff on site now.
Isn't it funny that we're constructing transmission for data centers or large power users, where we should just, and I'm sure Dave, you'd like this, is build the power right next to the data center, right? Generate at the source.
as a Pennsylvania guy, 3 Mile Island, and we got, and Meta and some other folks are signing deals left and right. And I think that's a logical thing to do. No question. Use what we got first.
Yeah. Right. It's slowly, I think that we're slowly starting to adopt that as we realize that the power grid is strained and reliability might not be great.
Yeah. And I think.
Go ahead, Dave.
Right, Sean, sorry. No, I was just going to say, strained obviously is an understatement. We all saw what happened in Spain and Portugal earlier this year. We've seen what's happening in Texas. Typically, there's reasons for that, but grid stability has to be a big part of the thought. And from our power protection view, it's completely flipped 180 degrees. Data centers were the ideal load at one time, right? They have perfect flat load, nothing to worry about. Now with AI training, it flips all over the place, hundreds of megawatt swings in sub-cycle increments. And so now the power grid, where the data center used to protect itself from the power grid, now the power grid wants to protect itself from the data center, right? So they're mandating that you have things like heavy duty, basically power protection facing out from the data center. And
right. And utility wants a steady load. Sorry, Amy, but I'm just saying utilities
base load is demanding
that they want to. Yeah, they want to load. And I just ran into, and I can't say what it was or who did it, but it was, you're going to get the power if you can give us a constant load at whatever we're providing you, say 40 megawatts. And so the tenants were looking at bringing in load banks, because the GPU, it's unpredictable when you're going to have load on the grid. So they were looking at load banks to keep that load consistent. I'm like, that's insane.
There's also some.
What does it take? Yeah, I was going to ask. So, what does it take for a data center to actually push power to the grid? Like, I get pulling power from the grid, but actually being a power generator and pushing back, not just load shedding, but actually kicking it back to the grid. What is that? What's required in that? Harry, Sean, somebody want to jump in?
Yeah, it depends on which utility it is, but usually I'm old enough to remember phone books. It's a phone book thick contract of technical specifications that have to be done to meet it. They want
to say it's an act of faith you were willing to take, right, Harry?
Exactly. And one of the things that's complex from a technical end is you've got to synchronize all your sources with that utility. You can't control their utility, but you can control your on-site generation. And as these larger plants get larger and larger behind the meter, that becomes a little more complex to do. With an AC power system in a microgrid, you've got to control the frequency, the phase angle, and the voltage to be able to connect different power sources together. And so that's going to be problematic on some of the big power plants, but I think with AI and the direction of going with DC distribution, we're probably going to see 1500 volt DC microgrids in the very near future in data centers.
So it doesn't make sense. Never really has made sense for data center to supply power back to the grid. Apple was the first to do it at scale with the first data center. Tom Jakovic had a great idea to build a huge solar field next to that Carolina data center, and they did sell power back to the grid. It's too expensive, it's too complicated, and it offers threat to critical load. So the economics don't really make sense. And in responding to the previous issue, I think the only thing we need to be talking about in the industry going forward is on-prem primary self-generation. We're going to be upside down pretty soon on the supply-demand curve with grid power soon. We know this, and every single one of my hyperscale clients is working on this nirvana of on-prem primary self-generation, because if you get that, you win. You can go anywhere. Then you can come to JLL and get a piece of dirt virtually in any location and not worry about where power is. And then you can commit with certainty to these load delivery schedules that you now are really, really entrenched to deliver, particularly to Wall Street. That's why there's these aggressive schedules for data center build-outs, because these things are promised to shareholders to guaranteed future delivery, and then you march the build cycle against it. So we've become very tied to the economics, and now power is a limiting factor, and we're starting to do all kinds of crazy things like build data centers in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and in the Southeast and other places, and started to explore other sources of fuel. So that's not going to stop. I gave a much longer version of that condensed summary at the DTech Data Center show several weeks ago, and crickets in the audience. That the utility folks do not want to talk about the fact that their customers are going to generate their own power. But that is what's happening. We must talk about this, and it is really the future to support all this load we put on the grid.
They need to partner with it. They need to be the power provider.
Or why don't they just build campuses so they can profit on the real estate?
Yes.
Another source of revenue.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Do they not watch CNBC? Are they against capitalism? I don't get it.
Well,
there's a new acronym. These MDIP, so MDIP, Massive Digital Industrial Parks. This is the new thing. I'm doing some client work on it now. So you heard it here second. MDIP, and they are massive centrally planned power plants, powered by a variety of different fuels, into which industrial assets will plug, including data centers, but not just data centers. And the thought is, this is really cool. You're going to build a 3 gigawatt first phase MDIP, and you're going to invite all these different chip fab data centers, and then the companies that manufacture the pieces and parts are going to build their factories there right next to these facilities. So this is really huge, big master planning thinking, and it's kind of interesting, I think.
What's the power source?
My money is on nat gas as the new primary fuel source for whether recip or turbines or whatever. When we get to where SMR is within a few years, I think nuclear will eventually win. Right. But my money's on nat gas right now.
Talking SMRs, we got Paul back, and I'm so excited because
sorry to leave the conversation. I was watching you from afar. So, I mean, just to build on a couple of points, if that's okay. I mean, Sean, you're quite right. The economics of SMR, once we get the supply chains and the volumes in place, will mean that they will become the power of choice for these hyperscalers, because it just makes sense. I mean, they're a natural bedfellow in terms of size, footprint, refueling cycle, no need for gas pipelines. You can put the data centers wherever you like, et cetera, et cetera. The issue on SMR isn't that they're not the right thing. The issue is how quickly can they ramp up. My old company, Rolls-Royce, is moving quickly to build supply chains, but we're talking about building 2 a year during the 2030s, and that will be about the same with Westinghouse and GE Hitachi. So that's a big gap between the tens of gigawatts that people were talking about earlier and the amount of capacity. I'm sure in the 2040s it'll accelerate. So the question is, between now and then, one of the benefits of going kind of behind the meter and on-prem power distribution, or power creation for SMRs, which is what you were talking about earlier, Sean, is you can start looking at combined heat and power systems, which you can't do when the source of generation is remote from the data center. It's very hard to do, and there's been some sort of failed attempts to do it so far. But as we move to liquid cooled, very high power semiconductors, we're now opening up the possibility of recycling fairly large fractions of the energy back into the cycle. And that changes the economics massively, because the costs of energy are so huge. So that's why on-prem, as you point out, isn't just the kind of logistical neatness of having a combined data center plus power station. It also drives the economics down as well. But we are going to need natural gas, as you quite rightly say, to keep the thing going.
Yeah, I mean,
that wasn't supposed to be a non sequitur.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna do data center 101 for all those people like me who have built a data okay, so we're not going to get SMRs for 5 years. We're going to have to do nat gas or other things. The Danes have their news. The Danish say that they're going to do everything renewable. It's a prototype, so I'll take it for a grain of salt. But they're going to do solar and wind and.
Well, good luck, eh? Good luck to them. And when you do the math on the energy storage requirements, as somebody said earlier, you end up with frightening numbers just for the capital cost. I mean, it's dumb. Sorry to say that, it is dumb. It's doing it completely on renewable plus energy storage. People are being sold promises of energy storage costs plummeting down, but actually, the reality of ordering. Certainly battery-based systems is that they're still pretty high.
Are we calling solar and wind renewable now?
We'll call it intermittent, Sean. That's the important thing about it. Yeah.
Hey, and by the way, there's more people in Wisconsin than in Denmark. Just saying.
Okay, all right, but they're trying to do 130 megawatt data centers on it. And it was so funny. You're reading the article and they're talking about it like it already exists, and then they go, just to be clear, this is just an idea. At the end of the article, it was hilarious, but I was like, okay, then why write it? I don't understand. This is a theory, prototype, whatever it might be. I don't know. Those Danes. Those Danes.
While we're talking about Europe, I've mentioned this before, but I've had a couple of founders and sustainability folks from Europe on the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. One in the UK, Deep Green, who basically is taking heat and using it from the data centers and using it for swimming pools and adjacent buildings. Another one in Sweden, T-Loop, with a partnership called Solink to try to take excess power and send it back to the grid. So there is interest. There is entrepreneurial interest and even venture-backed interest around this in a couple of pockets of Europe.
Right. But the flip side is look at
it's not just entrepreneurial.
Iregrid's running 80-90% renewables given their own statistics, and basically they shut down their data center industry. There's no new developments, and it's a shame.
Ireland consumes. Ireland's a 7 gigawatt island. 2 gigawatts comes from the UK via an interconnector. They've got massive amounts of offshore wind potential, but they've not built it yet.
Right.
Just coming back to Joshua's point about using the heat, completely agree, Joshua. And what we're seeing, it isn't just the economics, it's the social side as well. If you want to build a big data center next to a town, then if you use the residual heat of the power station to give free heat to the town is more likely to agree to the planning permission for the data center. So there's a bit of local economics and local politics that comes into play as well. So you're quite right. That's becoming quite a sort of a theme.
Big in Sweden. Harry, another company doing something is with greenhouses.
Pardon, Amy?
Yeah. What does it take from an infrastructure standpoint to do all these fancy exhaust heat systems and how does that really explain to me in 101 how does exhaust heat or capturing the exhaust heat reduce the energy usage in a data center? Go 101 for me. Please.
Well, it doesn't really reduce the energy usage in the data center, but what it does do is allow you to get that energy at a much lower cost by capturing the waste heat. The recip engine or a gas turbine's not 100% efficient. About half of the energy that you pull in out of the natural gas goes off as heat. If you can capture that heat and use it for something else, it makes the economics work on self-generation. So that's been why you haven't seen more of that in the past in data centers, saying, hey, let's go build our own plant and do it. They really didn't have a place to use the waste heat. But with the liquid cooling required for AI, that's going to help some. The other is that some of the providers of recip engines have really increased their efficiencies to where they can get a much, much better cost than what you were getting previously. It used to be, you go 10, 15 years ago, if you didn't capture the white heat, you were paying about double in cost of electricity, self-generating. So it's really tough. There are some other companies that are taking gas turbines, taking the waste heat and driving steam turbines to create additional electricity. And that's a pretty
Combined
smart way to
turbine.
do it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's combined heat and power, or CHP as it's sometimes called.
Yeah.
So when they're talking exhaust heat, they're talking from the power generation, but what about all the heat that the servers themselves produce? Are they capturing that, or is that not what we're talking about when they're talking exhaust heat?
They're not capturing that, but from years ago when I was on the green grid, that was something that was always, the mythical waste heat recovery system where we could make the data centers more efficient and recover some of that heat. And it's just such low grade heat with air cooling. It hasn't been done. Now with liquid cooling and direct chip, I think there's some people looking at that, and you may see some breakthroughs in the future. I hope so.
Yeah, there definitely is for the larger consumers now with the liquid cooling, you can get more high quality heat out of that. A lot of this depends on, so in the Nordics, for example, they have district heat. In Montreal, we have district heat. So there's places where it's relatively easy to tap into that if you can get that high quality heat, like Harry said. And we all think that, Montreal as an AI hub, or soon to be AI hub, they'll have more liquid cooled data centers. They'll have more waste heat that they can use in their district heat. So it should be a good solution for places like that for sure.
And you're not cooling, below 100 on the chip, so it's not a extreme drop in temperature. When you're for the efficiency.
It's very, very low grade heat. Very low grade.
Yeah.
It's got to be cold enough to have an appreciation.
So it doesn't have to be like a
Finland, Montreal, yeah.
So it's not like it's inside your house, like it's 72 degrees or 74. It doesn't have to get there. They'll operate at higher temp. Oh, interesting.
Data center environment can run at 85.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. My dad's house would work as a data center. Then he keeps it very warm in his house.
How efficient.
Howie, are you tracking that project in San Jose, the heat reuse one, the residential?
Yeah, the residential downtown. The mayor has been supporting that, and I've been actually trying to reach out to those guys. I haven't talked to him yet, the developer, but yeah, they're heat recovery from the data center adjacent to a residential unit.
Yeah.
Which would be the first in the US.
So if we go back, that would be interesting. So if we're talking, Paul, if you're going to go put a microgrid on next to a data center, how much land is required for you? Like if they're doing it as part of the development, how much extra land are you going to need for that, and then all the equipment that goes around it to get it to the data center for it to work and not blow it up? There you go.
So I'll answer your question, Amy. I'd also like to move in a slightly different direction as well, just to sort of stir the discussion up a bit. So roughly, most of the microgrid designs are in the order of 50 megawatts per acre. That's the sort of size of size. You can do vertical stacking. So for data centers in high density areas, like in the middle of cities, you can go vertically, but the cost goes up and the heat recovery problem goes up. But for a single story, it's about 50 megawatts every acre. So just do the math. If you've got a gigawatt, 20 acres is about what you need. So most of the designs end up kind of converging on that. That obviously doesn't include the solar farm, which you use sort of roof space on the data center for solar. And if you're in a particularly sunny place, like some clients in the Middle East, then you can put hundreds of megawatts of solar out into the desert. That sort of drives down the cost quite a lot with as much battery storage you can afford. The bit I'm going to move us in a slightly different direction, if you don't mind, because of course it's one couple of interesting kind of technology, kind of high risk, high payoff areas. One is in the power generation, one's in the chip design. So a lot of the big tech are putting a lot of money into fusion. So we're seeing sort of Amazon Web Services and Microsoft actually backing a few fusion companies. I'm not going to make any comment on it's sort of believe it or not story, but if it happens, then it's revolutionary because you don't need to go through the regulatory process that fission-based SMRs have to go through. So literally you can put a fusion reactor, in your backyard if it ever happens. And I'll leave the if as big, bold letters and leave others to judge the if. But it really is an incredibly, high payoff result if it's made to work. So, there are various designs around the place. Commonwealth Fusion Systems in MIT has famously sort of done a hell of a lot and moved a long way. And I have to declare an interest. I'm involved with Zap Energy in Seattle, which uses a different process. But we'll see. Maybe in the next 10 years, somebody will just make that moonshot, and maybe we'll get, all the cynics will be, will be put to one side. I don't know. I'm not going to predict. Of course, the other direction people are moving in is working on the semiconductors to drive the cost down, to drive up the efficiency of semiconductors. Particularly for these large language model sort of massive parallel search functions. Again, some of the big tech have been putting their bets into trying to create new silicon that just does it differently, rather than the belt and braces ARM core that's used in the NVIDIA chipsets. Again, it's very high risk, very high payoff, but that could absolutely change the game if any of those chipsets actually make it and do what they're labeled as doing. So we'll see. Sorry to go into the high tech bit, Amy. I'm just, you can come back to 101 if you like.
And actually, I think we should bring back the Rolls-Royce jet turbine generation plants, right?
Well, they're still made. They're just made by Siemens now, Howard.
Siemens making them. If anybody's never ever seen that, it's wild to look at a door and see a jet engine spinning on the ground, just running.
Yeah. But that's the way. I mean, most gas-fired power stations are jet engines. They're combined cycle gas turbines, and as someone said before, they're pretty efficient now. At full load, they're over 60% thermal efficiency. Typical reciprocating engine, average, it's the rule of thirds, as we say. So about a third of it will come out as electricity. A third comes in the cooling jacket heat that's wasted through the radiator, and a third goes out the exhaust pipe. And that's roughly, there are some recip engines getting up to 45% just, but most are hovering about 40%. So that's the sort of prize. If you can reuse that other 2/3, then you're driving down your energy bill quite a long way.
Paul, what's the power source on those in the engines? What are they? Jet fuel? Are they running on jet fuel?
Gas.
Just gas?
Natural gas.
Natural gas. Nearly every natural gas. Yeah. Nearly every power station in the world uses natural gas. Some are oil fired, kerosene, which is the same chemical formula as jet fuel, but that's a couple of percent. Most of them are natural gas.
Yeah, the natural gas is much cleaner than the jet fuel or the kerosene, so that's why they're doing that.
Yeah,
and has anybody seen any other technology?
Say again?
There were any other new technologies that if we're banking on nuclear and fusion, what other energy sources are we missing here? And it's expensive to do geo.
Fuel cells.
There's fuel cells. They've gotten a lot better. There's linear generators like what Mainspring does that can be upgraded to hydrogen eventually. Work on natural gas ore. Most turbines can be retrofitted to hydrogen as well if that becomes a thing. And there's also for storage. There's like a super cap graphene, some kind of new battery coming out that's rumored to be very immune to cycling, which would be helpful. And so there's a lot of cool stuff happening. It's hard to keep track, to be honest.
There's a lot of cool
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, a lot of it is, I don't want to, we love new technology and we don't want to, a lot of it struggles to achieve price points. Somebody mentioned fuel cells earlier. They're great. I love fuel cells. They can achieve 60% thermal efficiency. They're not exactly cheap. So I'll leave others to make the case for them. But certainly when we've actually tried to install them, the price can be quite challenging for large installations.
And the price, though, when you think about it, to build a data center, just a data center infrastructure, you're at 10 million per megawatt. But inside the data for a GPU deployment, it's running, and that's liquid cooled to chip, full deployment, all servers it's about 45 million per megawatt. That equipment lasts 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
What an investment, right?
Yeah. The thing you need to drive down is the OpEx. So, to make data centers work, you need about 5 people running them, and you don't want to be swapping out sort of parts of the power station to make them work. So, reliability and maintenance schedules that don't require on-site mechanics are essential for making the maths work.
Yeah. Well, all the companies that are going to start to become energy providers for data center development are going to be the winners, I think, in this game as we transition.
Absolutely.
And fortunately, Elon started it, and he's running with it because he gets it. He gets that how it needs to be built. And there was something about, and somebody mentioned something about him buying a power plant and shipping it overseas to get into one of his data center developments, probably the Memphis site, but it's all combined cycle turbines is what I'm seeing for his deployment right now.
Yeah, it's interesting that, Paul, you mentioned labor costs.
Is that the most efficient?
It's
Go ahead.
Probably the best way right now to do
for
it.
large scale power, gas turbines would be the choice. If you're building several gigawatts, that's what you'd need to do. The number of recip engines you could have to use would just be incredible. So you really cut down the land.
Yeah. Although, people are not frightened anymore of putting thousands of recip engines, Harry, because they're cheap and you can get like the maintenance shop down the road to repair them. So if you've got the land, then it's much cheaper than a gas turbine that requires a specialist sort of aerospace engineer to repair it. So you'd be quite surprised at the economics. And in fact, most of the ones that we're looking at, it's the recip engines that tip the balance just because of OpEx.
The OpEx is definitely better there.
Yeah. Well, if we can get them, and how long does it take to get them, and who's building them?
What are the new rack densities going to do to how you structure your power generation behind the meter? Is it going to change much? Or, I mean, as the racks themselves, you might not have as many racks inside of a building, but does that take into account? Is there anything there? Or does it not matter? I'm just curious.
I think it's going to have a big impact on the design of the data centers and how you distribute power within the data centers, but you're still going to need to generate behind the meter that much power. So it's not going to really impact the generation that much. How you deliver that power to the rack is going to change significantly.
Interesting.
You just can't, it's too much copper. You can't use the open compute design. 50 volts internal to the rack. That's not going to work with the servers that you have. So it's just not going to. Go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, Harry. I'm just saying, if you like technology, we're talking about technology. I was with a company yesterday developing superconducting bus bars. So this is a company that was in the fusion area and has found more mileage in the high temperature superconductors they're using for the magnets for the fusion are actually better deployed as bus bars in data centers. So there we are. There's another bit of technology that we might see, believe it or not, but it's another technology potentially that massively reduces the
How are they cooling them?
costs. How they could? It's liquid nitrogen, so it's jacketed liquid nitrogen around the bus bars.
Yeah.
So but anyway, we'll see. It's just another exciting.
That's
direction.
another
Smart.
promising technology like the fusion is. And
Yeah.
I look at that. I think about
For sure.
when I was in school, 50 years ago. I heard about 3 technologies that were imminent. It was going to be really high density batteries. It was going to be nuclear fusion, and it was going to be room temperature semiconductors. And 50 years later, superconductors. Yes.
Yeah.
So 50 years later, it's still
we still
not
wait
here.
for the room temperature stuff.
Exactly.
It's
like tomorrow, always a day away, right?
Always a day away. Exactly.
It seems like we're so far behind. It's like there's so much technology we need to develop to make it more efficient. We're and I love that looking at the loss of energy through a bus bar. Somebody's getting creative here. You don't think of that.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, you think about what AI is doing, all these data centers we're building. There's several experts that say that the breakthroughs on all 3 of those areas will come as a direct result of AI. So it'll be interesting to see if that's true.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Don't you think somebody should ask AI what we should do?
You mean once we get rid of AI, the word association that we have now?
Yeah, could you give us a plan?
Something
we're not thinking of?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Amy,
Exactly. I'm sure someone has. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, for sure.
I'm just going to open another because there's something a little bit happening in Europe. I just wanted to see whether there was any parallel over your side of the pond. One of the very interesting things that's happening is that energy costs are going up. And largely because of gas prices going up and lack of capacity. This may be not the case in the US. And so there's almost like a social tension now between if you build new generating capacity, should it be used to help drive down the costs of power to the home, or should it be used to power big data centers? And there's already the start of some very intensive social debate. Should the next nuclear power station be used for driving down the costs of, mama and papa industries in California, or should it be used to power data centers? And that's quite an interesting sort of line of sort of social engineering that I'm going to leave to politicians. I'm just an engineer, but it's just interesting listening to the debate. Yeah.
Yeah, that is coming up here, Paul. For example, with the recommissioning old power plants for data centers. The worthy ratepayers here in Pennsylvania, I am one, have complained that maybe we could use some of that to bring our power costs down before we worry about making Jeff Bezos enough money so he could rent out Venice for another 6 months or whatever he's doing.
Yeah, it's true.
With the big hyperscalers, about a year ago, I started hearing more strategy going to community building, community education, building strong relationships with regulators, elected officials, utility companies.
Yeah, that's
I think they've ignored it for a while, for sure. And I think they need to get, it's easy to paint data centers as the bad guys. And it's like, what does it do? It's just a big building that eats all our power and there's 5 people that work there, so how's that help the community, right?
Well, we can email each other and complain.
That's
why they're
true.
there.
iMasons has recognized several of the problems that the data centers are facing, and they say it's power, people, perception, which is what we're talking about here, and planet sustainability. So those are the things that most data centers have to look at and doing, and obviously the public perception is going to be very, very important. Power is probably number 1 right now.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I've also heard fiber, but I don't know yet.
Power is number 1 and number 3.
Yeah. For sure. And the last thing, Amy, I know we didn't talk about this. we didn't talk about this, but
ahead.
Open Origin,
Talk.
Open Origin just not Open Origin. OpenAI just signed a contract with Oracle for 4.5 gigawatts at a $30 billion annual contract. Wow.
Yeah,
Talk
didn't
about
you
power.
want to sign that lease, Howie?
I wish I did that lease.
I know.
At 4% would have been
I know.
fee.
Exactly.
But I didn't get in there.
Yeah, you didn't get in that deal? No. Yeah, I know.
So
It's insane, right?
Abilene gets the first, right? Abilene gets the first 2.5 there in Abilene. So they're going to get the, that'll be the first deployment, and then wherever other sites that they take down. But, it's a race to be the biggest provider of GPUs and AI. So we'll see where this ends up.
With a $4 trillion market cap. That's where
Yeah.
with
Right.
NVIDIA this week. They surpassed Apple and Microsoft.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, amazing.
No. They were talking today that NVIDIA is 3.6 of the global market cap. NVIDIA, one company, is 3.6% of the market cap globally. Like, it's insane.
Yep.
Like, how does NVIDIA do that? I don't know, but they are. It's like crazy. Yeah. They're at 4.6 trillion or something. Their valuation is in the T's.
They're such a coveted company to
work
with now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, they're such a coveted company to work with now. I heard they're running a RFP similar to for a couple of years back, right before the pandemic, Amazon had this sweepstakes going on for where HQ2 is going to be. So supposedly NVIDIA is running a version of this for where they're going to build a massive R&D complex somewhere in Israel. They're running a huge RFP process now on it. Supposedly Tel Aviv is going neck and neck against Haifa on this. But yeah, there's just massive amounts of capital going into figuring out how they're going to engineer more efficient GPUs to keep this going.
We're going to have a GPU and everything.
That's what I mean. Look at NVIDIA. You just said the NVIDIA value. And with their servers, you got a lifespan of 5 years before you refresh.
Right.
That's a great business.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Howie,
Yeah,
I will sell you a computer for $1 billion, and then it's going to crap out in 2 years, and I'll sell it to you again for another $1.5 billion. Like, there you go.
I'll take
Done.
two.
There you go.
I'll take two. Yeah.
Intel rode that refresh cycle for decades up until very recently.
Yep.
Yes, I know.
Wow.
I know. Is Intel even
Right.
around anymore? Are they even around? I don't even know. Who knows if they're around anymore? All right. Okay. Well, that was. I'm sorry for the bandwidth issues, but that was our show, man. Look at that. We made it to the end of the show. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I appreciate all of you and all your inputs. If somebody would like to get a hold of you, how could they do so, Harry? If someone wants to pull you out of retirement, how do they do that?
Probably the best way is to contact me via LinkedIn
Yes.
at this point. So I'm still on.
Very cool. Awesome. And Dave?
Yes, LinkedIn's the best way to get a hold of me as well.
All right. Awesome sauce. And Paul?
Yeah, LinkedIn, I'll go boring and stick with the others. LinkedIn is great. Yeah.
Howard, Barry, Howie.
I prepped it. I put it right here.
See?
Send me an email. Come on down.
Come
We've
on
got
down.
land
Send
and
him an
power.
email. You got land and power. And Joshua?
LinkedIn for sure. And I also publish an email newsletter on Sundays. You can sign up on our website, dcsmi.com, Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute.
Very cool. And this has been a show of the U.S. PropTech Council. If you are not a PropTech Council member, well, that's just silly. You should be. So go to proptechcouncil.com and join today. And we will see y'all next week. And hopefully I'll get better broadband. We'll see what happens. But thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Harry.
you.
Thanks,
Have
Dave.
a good
Thanks,
day.
Howie. Thanks, Paul.
See everybody.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
How about you?